Let them kill us all and we'll stand and watch. Well, brother, that ain't for me. I'll be running and a jumping and a skipping and a bopping when it blow me to smithereens.
Hello, lovelies. Today we're going to be taking a look at Winter of Atom, which is an adventure campaign for Modiphius's 2D20 Fallout game, based on the Bethesda games. But first, a little bit of housekeeping, I suppose. At time of recording, I need to raise quite a bit of money for some work on the house. So if you can afford to buy anything of mine, preferably from post-mort.com, that'd be a big help. Or if you could sign up to my Patreon, even for $1 a month, that would help a great deal as well, and encourage me to actually put out separate stuff for people who support me on Patreon. So if you feel at all capable, it would be appreciated, because I need to I need to raise a few thousand caps to fix some stuff around the house. So thank you very much. So this is an adventure, and people who follow the channel and my reviews will know that I'm not generally much on adventures, because when it comes to value for money out of books that you buy for role-playing games, adventure books are generally the least valuable. Because at most you can play through the adventure once, and that's pretty much it. Sure, you can rip stuff out of the adventure, like additional monsters or whatever, but having those kind of things scattered across numerous other books is not particularly helpful for reference and so on. And often any specialist rules are really tied to the particular adventure. So that's why I don't normally buy adventure books, and why when I review them I always bring this stuff up, because generally speaking, role-playing games are enormous value for money when you compare them to, say, computer games and so on. But when it comes to adventure books, that's less the case. So why would I buy, of my own volition, an adventure book for Fallout? Well, I'm currently, at time of recording, running a Fallout game, a mini campaign arc of about 6 sessions over on Grim Streams. Go and watch. We've done 2 sessions so far. And so I was kind of curious how the makers of the game saw adventures being constructed, campaigns being constructed, and how we would play them. And looking through the material, there's not a huge amount of stuff out for Fallout, probably due to license restrictions and so on. I know how that can be. So there's not a huge amount of choice, but of the material that was available, Winter of Atom seemed to be a good quasi-supplement to go alongside the other material that I do already have, the main books and the guides. And it touches on something that hasn't really been touched on in the Fallout games as of yet, that being nuclear winter, which is a kind of iconic thing that has been associated with atomic war since forever, but rarely seems to get explored in such media and so on. Usually you see radioactive deserts and so on. This is probably due to the relative proximity of Hollywood to deserts, and the relative ease of shooting in deserts as opposed to the Arctic. Probably, at least I would think that's the case. And so I was curious about that and how they would handle it, because a nuclear winter is something that is pretty iconic. Now, a lot of the additional rules and so on that are presented in this guide are also found in the actual guides, you know, the Wanderer's Guide and the Settler's Guide. So you don't necessarily need this book, as it turns out, which was a little bit disappointing. But for my purposes, there is plenty of stuff here that can be nicked, modified, stolen, and used elsewhere, which is good news for a lot of us, I suppose. There is a problem with the 2D20 Fallout material, which otherwise I think is the best implementation of 2D20 that Modiphius have done so far, that I'm aware of. But there does seem to be this problem, probably with the licensing, in that they only seem able to focus largely on what is available in Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. And so there is a real danger of over-concentrating on the Commonwealth and on the Fallout 76 area, rather than looking further afield and creating new stuff beyond those bounds. It's like how, for a very long time, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, if you had the license to do that, you were restricted to the Empire, and you couldn't really write anything about anything outside of that area. So I suspect it's a somewhat similar restriction when it comes to Fallout. Though, of course, as a games master, you're not limited by that, but it does kind of limit and cause us to retread areas and concepts from the Fallout computer games. Mind you, there's plenty of material there. It's just if you want to look further afield, you're going to have a hard time supporting that with the available material, and that's a shame. I mean, at least it makes things semi-canonical, but otherwise, it's I feel that it's holding back the game from really going all out. Because there is the old Fallout Bible, there's the Council Van Buren project, there's other older games that could be tapped into for content, but don't seem to be. Probably due to rights issues and copyright and intellectual property and all of that usual nonsense. So yeah, some of this stuff is repeated in the guides, so you don't necessarily need this book, but for my purposes, which is taking elements of this book and using them elsewhere, or modifying them, or repurposing them, or whatever, there is a lot of stuff in here. A lot of stuff that can be nicked. It even has a section specifically on blowing up the book and looting the scraps that get left behind. And so there is a bunch of useful stuff that you can steal. There are expanded environmental rules with an emphasis on the harsh winter. There's expanded rules about radiation, cleaning up areas, greater exposure to radiation, radioactive sources, all of that sort of thing. It's a big theme through this adventure. There's expanded rules potentially for creating complex diseases. Rules you can use for tracking down items or people, which could be useful for bounty hunting. And since I'm sure a lot of people will now be looking at Fallout and wanting to play badass ghoul bounty hunters, that seems like it'd be something useful. If your players wander off the beaten track, speak language today. If your players wander off the beaten track and decide to explore a big complex location, but you don't have it prepared, like a vault or a big city block or something, there are some rules for stripping down that crawl or exploration to kind of the key points and making rolls to handle the exploration rather than doing it room by room, which is useful if you quickly need to improvise. There's rules for battles and hordes, minion creatures, gambling rules, camping, a whole bunch of stats for Children of Atom, which would be useful if you want to incorporate them or similar quasi-occult cults into your game. Reputation handling, downtime and settlement tasks, all of that kind of stuff is in there and extremely useful. There's also some guidance for if you want to create balanced encounters rather than just throwing monsters and bandits at the players and hoping for the best, and more rules for applying templates to NPCs and creatures to give them their descriptors and so on, similar to how you have legendary or irradiated creatures in the games. So there is a lot here before you even get into the adventure. And then within the adventures, you do get decent templates for different characters, and sort of more generic NPCs as well, like wastelanders, security guards, cult members, all of that kind of thing. There is an emphasis on the Children of Atom, as I say, and that's fine, but it does make it less useful if you're not particularly interested in including those kinds of things. There's a few newish settlements and so on, more like camps, and some details on some of the settlements which, by the time in the timeline that you get to play Fallout 4, they are abandoned or destroyed settlements. So there is a little bit of expansion on the lore from the areas within the games, and there's some unique creatures that you could reuse elsewhere and so on as well. The adventure itself it's okay. If you're into Children of Atom and you're into the kind of alluded to occult elements that you can find in the background of a lot of Fallout stuff, kind of hinted at, then you'll get more mileage out of it, I think. Personally, while I find that stuff interesting, it's not the main focus that I want to engage in when I'm playing Fallout. Again, your mileage may vary. You may want to bring in more Lovecraftian stuff into the game, as you wish. That's entirely up to you. Otherwise, the adventures are fairly sort of standard, slightly less railroaded than normal adventure, though events will proceed apace whether you're involved in them or not. So, all things considered, then, what do I reckon? Well, it's well presented, as a lot of Modiphius stuff is, and obviously it clearly takes advantage of a lot of the concept art and so on that is available for Fallout. And so it has the look of the newer Fallouts down on lock, pretty much. There's a lot of assets from the games and so on that you will see represented in here, often in their cleaner sort of pre-war form, so you can actually see them better, which is nice. So, a low 4 for presentation, I think, because it's good, but it does feel to be in a little bit of a rut, and it does suffer a little from this kind of low contrast, pastelish disease that's spread across role-playing art. Less so, I think, because of the whole retro gee-whiz space kind of element to it. But I would like to see it stretched a bit more and do a few things a little bit differently moving forward. I think obviously you want it to tie into the Fallout identity, but I also feel like the role-playing game needs to develop something of its own identity as well. It's hard to pin down exactly what I'm trying to say. It's good, but with their budget and the recent popularity, obviously, I just wish they'd stretch a little bit more. Maybe they will in some future releases. Remains to be seen. So yeah, a low 4 for style. In terms of substance, also a low 4. The adventure is okay. It's average. But what makes the book valuable to me, and I suspect to a lot of you, if you share my views on adventures, is the additional material. And there is a lot of useful additional material. And I was pleased, nay, chuffed, to see that they specifically called out that, hey, you can rip this book to shreds and use these other bits elsewhere. So that was nice and definitely adds a lot of value to it for me. If you're into Fallout and you're playing an ongoing campaign of Fallout 2D20, I would say this is worth a purchase. Though a lot, but not all, of the expanded rules, ideas, and so on can be found in the other guides. So if you already have the Settler's Guide and the Wanderer's Guide and the little GM pamphlet handbook, this is less important to have. But there's still enough there that it's probably edging on worth it, even if you do have those books, at least in my opinion, if you're going to be running an ongoing campaign. The encounter builder and the additional NPCs and so on is going to be useful to anybody, so it's almost worth it on that basis. So that's 4 out of 5, 8 out of 10, recommended, definitely. Zang. Postmortem Studios, role-playing games, and a lot more to die for. Post-mort.com